So we've obviously got the no better time to be inside mentally flagellating yourself. Oh my god, nearly knocking a pair of RockShox pikes off the ceiling onto my head. That wouldn't have been fun. You'll see how I professionally moved my finger there at the last second before a drill bit went coursing through it. Of course, the whole thing is, does this fit in the car? But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so we've got the sleeping platform right way up. I'm just going to buzz these screws back out of it using my new driver bits, which make a world of difference. Okay, right. So we've got all the screws out and all the legs off. And as I said before, I'm broadly happy with how these are positioned. I am going to keep them in their orientation so I know which one belongs to which. So when doing some research for this particular build, I did come across this video here, which I'll link there or down here. And I really like the idea behind it. So originally I was going to place piano hinges. I had two different lengths of them, and I was going to have the secondary panels that come towards the back of the front seats basically just hinge and flip forward. I kind of like the idea of that. It sounded like it would be pretty cool. In hindsight, I think it's actually going to be more trouble than it's worth if it works at all, because I don't think there's going to be the clearance from the height of this platform to the headliner to allow it to actually pivot. I also just think it's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass. So what I'm going to do instead is, using the tips that she had in her video, which I think she learned from someone else, is I'm actually going to have two of these legs put together and with a larger hole drilled out of them, where you're going to basically drop bolts in. So it means that there's going to be a freestanding leg that goes in temporarily in the middle, or there might be two or three of them. And that's going to mean that these panels will just slide forward and slot into position. And that means that not only do I not have to deal with faffing around with hinges, but it also means that I don't have to create some sort of support underneath to also, you know, hold it in place when it's unfolded. It's going to be more simplistic, but I think for the purpose of a first attempt at this, it's just going to make more sense. So I'll do that once I get these legs cut down to size. So when you look directly down at the 90-degree line here on the miter box, what you can probably see is that some of the cuts on these legs are almost perfectly 90 degrees. But some of the others, because I was using a jigsaw and a bit of a track, are not so much now. It may look okay from some angles, but others, there's a bit of a tilt going off at a different axes. Now, some legs are better than others, and I'm not picking out a specific example, but just picking one of these legs at random, and we can see that, yeah, on one side it's okay, and then on the other side it's not okay. And a similar story here. So we're going to trim these down to 380 mil, down from 400, and that's going to give us a much better chance of having a completely flush surface with which to work from. So you can see there the sort of meandering angle that it's at. Okay, so we have our workpiece on the table. So just going to go and mark this out at the 10 mil mark and give it a bit of a dash in line with that mark there. Flip it around and do the same. And of course, given that we're cutting wood, very much so a case of measure twice, cut once, because already in doing this before I broke out the camera, I managed to mark it actually at a 15 mil line, not a 10 mil line. So taking out my steel ruler just to double check my work, and just a slight adjustment here, because these carpenter's pencils are pretty, I find, quite cumbersome to work with. Cool. Spin it around up to my mark, and we can get this cut down. Okay, so we've got our miter box. Drop in the workpiece and to get it lined up, and I'm going to take some spring clamps and just pop this on to hold it nice and steady in position. I'm going to use two to stop it rotating in any way. And then taking my tenon saw, do a bit of a guide cut first of all. So that's one side done. Let's take a look and see how clean a cut that is. I mean, that is is pretty clean. So that looks really nice and flat. You can see versus a kind of parallel guideline there. And if I sit it on the desk, it sits up under its own steam. So pretty happy. Okay, so all of the legs have been cut down to size, and I've just thrown them together and stuck this wood clamp on them. And if you don't focus on the lovely orange Patriot in the background, you can see that those are pretty much bang on. So the clamp is just holding them together, but they're sat on the desk side by side. So I'm really happy with that. At least we know we've got a nice, perfectly flat platform. I am going to give it a quick run over with a sanding block just to make it as smooth as possible. Then I'm going to drill some pilot holes into it, and then I'm going to start working on the frame. A couple of things I want to point out at this point, if I haven't mentioned them previously. When I set out to do this, I wanted to do it for as little cost as possible. So I bought a relatively cheap SUV and the Honda CR-V. It's 21 years of age, etc., etc. But also when it came to tools and materials, like I didn't have a miter box. I didn't have a tenon saw. I did have these spring clamps. I didn't have a combination square. I didn't have these, I think they're called F clamps. Didn't have that sort of stuff, and I held off buying it. But then I realized that actually for the relatively low outlay of, best part of $10, $10, a couple of dollars, and even the plywood, it's just well worth it, because otherwise you're just faffing around with tools you might already have that aren't really up to the job, and you end up doing a bit of a hack job at it. Now, this plywood is 12 millimeters thick. It's not marine grade or anything like that, and when I did research for this build, it did say to use 18 mil. Now, I thought 18 mil felt excessive because I am going to be obviously building this kind of frame underneath it. So it's not like there's going to be massive expanses of it that have to be self-supported. So I reckon I'm going to be okay on that front, but we shall see. If needs be, I can repurpose this wood for something else, so all is not lost. But when you are setting out for the sake of a few dollars for things like a handsaw, a miter box, some clamps, just things, the bare minimum, it's probably well worth it, and it'll probably end up saving you money in the long term. Right, now let's get cracking on building a frame. So for the purpose of trying to do this with some degree of accuracy, I've measured myself out a little pilot hole jig. So I basically just line it up with the edge of the bat, and I'm going to throw a spring clamp on it, and then I can drive these pilot holes in, and then at least I know that they are exactly even on each piece, or at least that is the plan. So let's see how this goes. So I take my little workpiece. I'm using the end that wasn't drilled the last time, popping my little jig on it, and I am lining up the sides here. It's only screwed in one place as well, so I do have to kind of make sure that everything is quite flush. Then take my spring clamp and try not to clamp my thumb to the workpiece, and then I have it all lined up, and then I can just take my drill and I can just bang out these pilot holes. So and it just means less faff, more accuracy. So throughout this entire thing, I am, if it wasn't immediately apparent, I am kind of making it up as I go in terms of process and approach. But what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to line up my timber, my 35 by 70. I'm just going to run it along here, because then I'm going to know exactly how long it needs to be at a minimum. And then I'm just going to make those kind of rough cuts, and then I can refine it after the fact. So that's what I'm going to do now. So firstly, I'm actually going to spin it this way, and I'm going to get the first piece of timber in. Okay. So this is what I'm going to use for the framing. It's slightly smaller than that which is used for the legs. The legs are 45 by 90s. This is 35 by 70. So it's just that, maybe that's one size down. And I'm basically just going to line it up here and then make my kind of first pass kind of cuts. I'm going to leave some overlap as well, because I actually do want to have the opportunity to potentially build out from the end. So this is the rear door of the car. This is the middle of the car. So you're kind of looking at it from like the front seat looking back. So I want to actually leave some off the end here, because I would like to be able to build the support for that secondary panel that comes forward. So I will do that. I will leave myself a little bit of wiggle room, and we will get chopping. So these are all broadly going to be pretty rough cuts to begin with. Sunglasses continuously falling off my head. So I'm going to take my spring clamp I'm just going to clamp it down on this end of the wood, and then at this end here I'm just going to mark off kind of roughly where I need to be. So I'm going to give myself like loads and loads of wiggle room, probably come out here just to chop it down, and then I'm going to have like a rough framework with it, and I can kind of refine slightly, play around with the orientation of it. So right, combination square. So at least this allows me to make pretty straight lines on what would otherwise be not particularly straight pieces of wood. So I need my Sharpie wherever I've placed it. And yeah, for the purpose of this, look, I don't want to be like totally wasteful, but I do want enough. So let's go across there and let's get this cut down, because then I can just use this as the guide to make the second cut, and then so on and so forth. Before I actually do any cutting there, I'm just gonna, just as a little bit of a reminder as to some of the dimensions that we're working with. So this is 105 centimeters, and that's width-wise across the back of the car, and it's 81.5 centimeters deep. So I'm just actually going to write these measurements on it, because when cutting up the wood, I don't want to be wasteful and start throwing away scrap lengths of wood where I could have made some, you know, marginally more efficient cuts and actually made a bit of a difference. So this is 815 mils, and I don't care about writing on it because there is a plan for afterwards. And 105, so that's 1050 mil. So 1050. That's some incredible writing skills at 90-degree angle. Right, so now I can just do a little bit of math, probably in my head and probably incorrectly, to work out what is the most efficient lengths to actually cut this piece to in order to get the most bang for my buck, irrespective of the fact that it's actually quite cheap wood. I've lined up about 900 mil of a length here. This framework, as I said, is actually going to run inside of the legs, so it's going to be, even though this is 1050 mils in width, it's going to be not the full width. But first I'm just going to have a quick hydration break just to make sure I'm thinking clearly. So I need to be at my very best. Okay, I've got the wood clamped down, which is broadly in line with where it'll sit. This is where the boot door is, and there is going to be a piece, this is just scrap, but there's going to be a piece that will run across in this manner as well along the floor. Now, more importantly is towards the middle of the car, because this is where things get considerably more complex, given that there's more contours, but also there's also ridges in the floor line itself. So originally I had thought I was actually going to run it out past the end of the board, but actually the sleeping platform extends beyond the legs. So I actually need to make cuts around here, and that will actually allow it to sit inside the general frame that is afforded to me, with kind of relatively standard shape of the boot floor in this area. So I'm going to mark it off here, and that's going to give me still a little bit of room to play with, but it's just going to mean that these are the kind of length of cuts that I need in order to build this framework internally in the boot out of this 35 mil. We have the miter boxes back out. I actually really like using this because it's just nice to know that what you're doing is actually going to be accurate and at a good kind of right angle. Otherwise, you're just annoys you ongoingly. Then I've had to open the drawer to put a clamp down here, and I've also used some of the scrap pieces from the offcuts to actually make a little bit of a wedge so that it sits up at an even height. And now we can just chop. So using our Sharpie, so we're all flush at that end. Draw a line across it there, and then we can slide it down. So this. Beautiful. It looks a lot like it's going to storm. But anyway, now, the importance of little drilling jigs. This is the length that's going to run from the back door towards the center of the car. So there's going to be another leg that goes up here. Same on the other side. This is going to be the vertical leg that sits down in the corner near the rear door. Now I've clamped them together. This is the orientation. So this rail is going to run down the inside, and there's going to be a cross member that comes across. But what I wanted to show was if I take this clamp off, and just why it's worthwhile sometimes making these jigs in the first place, takes obviously a little bit of time but can pay dividends, is because I can then come along, flip it upside down, place this piece on top, and then I have my pilot holes for the frame itself. So I don't want it to be exactly in the middle for this piece because there's going to be other screws that have to run across it as well. But it does mean that I can get these holes knocked up so there's a degree of uniformity. Then I can flip it around. I can use it on the far side. I can use it on that end. And it just means that we have a consistent approach throughout. We're just going to get this all lined up here. So it's just as per what we did previously. We're going to bang in our pilot holes into this vertical leg from the side. That is going to give us the guide to then screw it into the runner that's going to run lengthways. So we've got it lined up, drill in. You'll see how I professionally moved my finger there at the last second before a drill bit went coursing through it. But that's that one done. Doesn't come out the full length on the far side, but no fear because that's given us enough of a guide. Then I'm going to carefully keep all of this held in place, flip this around, and do the same then on this side. So and now we can do the same with all of the other rails. Okay, update. So I've got the sleeping platform up on the work table, and I have basically just placed the legs and these rails in the position that they would be in based on the markings I originally made to drill the pilot holes in the sleeping platform. Now, we are looking at it obviously flipped upside down. The orientation of the legs will be the other way around as well. However, the purpose of this is to just get the measurement for this piece here so that I can make it up. I feel once that is in place, obviously the two sides will be joined. It means that I can make the same length for the far end, and I think the whole thing will come together much easier. But what I'm really liking so far is that because I've been using these like little guide hole jigs the whole way along, is that there's a lot of uniformity to everything. So it really has been measure twice, cut once, which I know should go without saying, but I have a tendency to rush through things when I kind of get an idea in my head. So to be able to slow down, to mark everything okay, as I'm happy with it, has been a real help in making sure I don't end up with pieces that are like 40 mils difference in length. So, you know, fingers crossed it continues for the rest of the build, but let's get this measurement done up and we can get on to completing this frame. I think an absolutely essential piece that I've used throughout this has been just using these quick clamps. They've been just super helpful for just holding things in place, making sure that stuff doesn't meander around when you're trying to take an important measurement. So yeah, definitely strong recommend. So we've got that one in place there. I'll just square it up a little bit, and then I'll pop this one on the far side, and then I'll feel quite comfortable that this is in fact the 2 points from which this measurement is due to be taken. Of course, the whole thing is, does this fit in the car? But that's neither here nor there. Measuring tape. Okay, so that is 935 mils internal. So I'm going to have a rummage around and see, do I have a piece of wood that actually satisfies that before I get chopping anything else. Okay, so no sooner had I just hit end record on that last clip, and I picked up this one piece of scrap wood, and it's almost exactly the length I need, which is fantastic because it means it will minimize the wastage. So it's 102, and so we need to just bring it down to 93.5. I will double check that before making the cut. Got a head like a sieve. Yeah, 935 mils. So let's get that marked up. Next thing, where is the Sharpie? there, and I'll square that off and get that cut, and then fantastic, we're in business. All right, let's get this all back in its mock-up position. Oh my god, nearly knocking a pair of RockShox pikes off the ceiling onto my head. That wouldn't have been fun. I can hear the thunder starting as well. So I am quite grateful for the drop in temperature, and also the fact that I'm not about to get lashed on by doing this outside, which at one stage I naively considered. Piece de resistance might be a bit strong, but this should just slot exactly into position, and it does. The miter box pays its way once more. So I am going to get this tack screwed together. It's the screw version of tack welding, and then we can basically just knock out the same on the other sides. That storm is really starting to break, so no better time to be inside mentally flagellating yourself with woodworking and measurements, and being about 2 wood clamps shy of full confidence. Okay, so the frame is now, sorry, huge roll of thunder outside. It's obviously all been kind of really heavily reinforced, and it's super sturdy. So I'm really, really happy with that. I can't bring it outside to put it into the car currently on account of the fact that there's a pretty large storm erupting outside. What you're looking at here is actually what's going to sit on the floor of the car boot. Now, what I am kind of in two minds about is actually putting a runner or cross member in between these lengths here. So this is going to be running from the back door of the car to the middle of the car, which will just provide me an opportunity to reinforce it a little bit further, even though it's super strong. But also, should I want to have drawers in and have some sort of dividing line down the middle, I can do so. So I'm not going to do that just yet, because I can always do that afterwards. But right now, I think it is it's in a pretty good spot. I'm just going to flip it around and then tack the sleeping platform onto it, and then that should be that for this component anyway, and then I can get cracking on the extension. So how I'm squaring this up is doing the really professional method of eyeballing it, and then I'm taking my combination square and basically just going around and seeing how far off each individual corner is, and really weirdly, they're pretty much all there. So this number 3 is the only one which is slightly out, but the rest of them are all basically bang on. So that's all squared up now, so I'm just going to bang in a screw into each corner. Actually, for the sake of being thorough, I'll put a pilot hole in just so it doesn't go wandering off, because these pieces have been drilled previously. Main body of the platform is finished. I've decided to put in these additional pieces here in the front and back just to give it a little bit of an extra rigidity, and also means then that there should be a little bit less movement. Unsure as of yet whether or not I'll actually run a piece that goes the length down the middle, but the storm has passed, so we can throw this back in the car and make sure everything fits. Slight issue, won't go in far enough, and the cause is these little bits that I left intentionally are now fouling on that plastic housing, so I'm going to take it back out and just trim them off, and if I do need something along those lines later on, I'll figure out a different way of doing it. Like a bloody glove, there is barely a millimeter going spare anywhere. In fact, I am going to take some of the edges off it because I can see it just making even more shit of some of the body panels. But yeah, I'm gonna grab the jigsaw and just give that a quick rip. So, final test, does the door shut? And it does. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Right, onto the extension. So first off, taking my little punch, and I'm just going to make 2 indentations. I need to run these kind of close to the edge on both sides because they need to be kind of far enough away from the edge of both sides of the sleeping platform. So I am eyeballing it because at the end of the day, these are pieces of scrap wood. It's not the end of the world, but I would like to have it broadly thereabouts. I don't have the measurements for this because I am having to work it out on the go or on the fly because I don't have the sleeping platform built yet for the front part of the car. Okay, so that's the 3mm drill bit, and I'm going to swap that out for the 8mm, which will just mean that I can run decently substantial bolts that will be definitely able to hold the sort of rigidity I'm going to need. So you can see there, so it's fairly close to the edge, and then a bolt will just be able to drop down through the sleeping platform and pin this into position. So just do it for the same on this side. Try and get this as straight as I can while not being braced anything. And already it's wandering off. And it's burst through the side. Fabulous. So that's that ruined.
Well, that was fucking dreadful.
Just going to quickly knock up a third, and I think probably final.
What did he say?
Leg piece for the joint of the sleeping platform. So I've just knocked this up based on the length of the 2 others that I've been working with. I'll get this smashed up pretty quick. Decided to go and actually just knock up a fourth. Reckon I'm probably going to end up needing it, so better to do it now than when I moved on to something else. So here we are in the vehicle, and originally, if you watched from the first episode, my initial plan was to actually have a split in the sleeping platform so that I could elect to have one side or the other or both. Now, since it's actually gone into the vehicle and you see how much you actually have to shave off it just to get it through the doors, it actually renders this narrow side really, I think, just pointlessly narrow. I don't think anyone is going to be able to actually utilize that in isolation. So I think I'm actually going to revert to just having pretty much just one big piece, which cuts down a lot on fat. Does mean I lose a little bit of flexibility in terms of having a seat up or not, but I think broadly speaking the likelihood of me needing one side or the other, or for some reason having to have one of these seats still up, I think is pretty slim. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to mark this up and get cracking on cutting. It is 42 degrees Celsius. I am cooking in this greenhouse of a Honda. So let's get back into the relative cool of the garage. So from what I just measured out there in the vehicle, we need 1050 millimeters by 700 millimeters. So this panel is 900 by 1210. Okay, so mark at 700 mils. Do the same on the other side. So gone ahead now and marked it at 700 mils across a number of different little points. I'm going to draw a line between them, and that should give kind of the squaring for that length. Then I'm just going to do the same for the other side as well. And then obviously double, triple check everything, because this is my last panel of wood, so I definitely don't want to go and screw it up and then be left having to go back to Bunnings. Okay, so we have our guide for that cut, and then I'm just going to square it off on the other side as well. So given I now have this straight line running across it, I can quite readily measure out and mark exactly where I need to be for this next cut. So there, 1050, and then I can run a perpendicular up that side. So I marked up this piece of wood and I've just moved it along, and again placed dots all along it, which when I measure them in from the side are all equal, equidistant, and just spot check it's exactly where it needs to be. So pretty happy with that. I can then take my piece of wood on the straight edge, which is this edge, the straight edge being the edge that I did not cut, because that would not be the straight edge, and on that line there. So all of this will be gone. So I've measured that I need to be 40 mils off this cut line, which it is. So this piece is exactly in place. So I'm going to take my clamps and first just going to put a spring clamp on this just to hold it in position. I'm going to put another clamp on it, and I'm just going to put in some like little tack screws just to hold that in place, and that'll serve as my guide. Man, that is a lot louder than you think it's going to be. All right, but successful. Pretty clean line. Yeah, I'm just going to run it out. Take it to the end. Scrap wood has been kind of pretty on theme for a lot of this project, and it's come in really handy, and we actually have very, very little waste, or a lot less waste than I thought we would have. So I'm just going to do the same for this length, and then we're pretty much finished. So oddly, it has wandered slightly off the line here towards the tail end by about, I'd say no more than 2 mil. But otherwise, pretty successful in my opinion, because that can be a bit of a pig of a job comparative to everything else that we've had to do so far today. But it was pretty okay. I've just taken the corners off with the jigsaw. Hadn't planned to originally, but then thought it's no bad idea to just not have pointy bits that will get caught and everything and possibly puncture back of the seats, scratch up the interior even more so than it already is. So now I'm just taking a file and I'm just smoothing it out a little bit. So there we have it. So that's with the extension in, as you can see. It's not obviously bolted into position, it's just freestanding there for a bit of a final check and mock-up. In terms of length, okay, so total length is 152. Now I'm 165. 5, but obviously I don't stretch out entirely in bed, so that should be absolutely fine. So I'm pretty happy with that now. I think there's obviously quite considerable gaps down the side at the doors, same on both sides. We still need to obviously build out the drawers as well for all the storage for the gear, which I am going to get started on pretty soon. I might take a break for the rest of the day given the heat, but I am also going to go and get the flooring, so I may go and actually do that component of it today, and then that will be that done. Yeah, pretty happy so far. Let me know what you think, and if you're interested in seeing how this all goes and what it's like to build a bit of a CRV camper conversion with almost no plan, then stay tuned. So that just about wraps this episode. We've obviously got the sleeping platform now in the vehicle. It all fits, which is the main thing. A couple of little fine tuning things to do with regards to fixing it into position. AliExpress delivery has just arrived, which has this 90-degree clamp in it, which is going to be absolutely critical for making the drawers. So I'm kind of laying out some wood to establish kind of what I'll probably need to go out and buy still, but it's too damn hot out there. It's 42 degrees Celsius, so I'm going to probably call it for today. If you've enjoyed this project so far, like, comment, and subscribe, and basically vindicate the fact that I kind of came up with this whole idea and did all the plans in my head before going to sleep each night. So I didn't really write anything down to do some measurements once I bought the vehicle, but I designed it all in my head and came up with a plan there. Obviously not without doing research of some other fantastic people out there on YouTube who have built things in the past. But so far, I'm pretty happy with how it's gone. We have incurred very little waste wood. And what we have got, I think, will probably be put to good use. But we're going to be away mountain biking next weekend. So that Orange 5 needs to come down off the wall and needs to get looked at and make sure it's all okay. The floor is full of sawdust, obviously. And yeah, I think that's about it. So like, comment, subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and we'll pick it up not next week, but probably the week after. Peace.